Every legend begins with a name, but this one began with a horse. Bucephalus, the sole conqueror, the beast who carried Alexander the Great across deserts, mountains, and empires. He had never lost a battle until this final one. At the edge of the world, in the heart of a storm, he fell, and when the blood dried, Alexander didn't build a statue. Instead, he built a city, not for the general, not for the king, but for the fallen friend. What happened that day on the banks of the Hydaspes that made the King of Kings kneel before memory itself? A king, a storm, and a horse that carried an empire. This is the story of the battle that shook the gods and broke the heart of legend. Before the river, there were mountains. Alexander's army had crossed the Hindu Kush, the very spine of Asia, where the sky crushed the earth and the cold claimed the weak. Many died, yet the Macedonian flame burned on. Emerging from the highlands, they entered the lands of the Indus, and there, peace shook hands with power. King Ambi of Taxila welcomed Alexander, not with fear, but with friendship. An alliance was forged, one king yielding to another. More petty rulers followed, choosing allegiance over annihilation. And to the east, a message was sent, a summons, a demand. Surrender or face the storm. Porus, king of the Pauravas, replied not with ink, but with iron. He would not kneel, he would fight. The stage was set for a game of shadows. Along the western bank of the Hydaspes, Alexander pitched a grand camp, tents, horses, drills, and patrols, all in plain sight. It was a deliberate spectacle, a war of nerves. Porus, commanding over 35,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, 300 chariots, and 100 elephants, watched from across the river with patient eyes. Scouts claimed that the Macedonian camp had fallen into stillness. The monsoon, it seemed, had even stilled Alexander, but it was all a lie. By night, Alexander sent scouting parties sweeping along the riverbanks, hunting for weakness. At last, 18 miles upstream, hidden behind the thick forest, they found it. Back at the camp, he left General Treacherous with nearly 6,000 troops and orders to make as much noise as possible. Horns, fires, drills, all designed to make it seem as though Alexander was still present. To seal the illusion, a body double, an officer clad in royal armor, paraded through the camp on horseback, mimicking Alexander's stature and gestures. From a distance, the king was still there, but the real Alexander, cloaked in shadows, had already gone. With 6,000 of his finest, infantry, archers, elite companion cavalry, he slipped into the forest, marching north under cover of darkness, their destination, the secret ford. It was a night when even gods might hesitate, but Alexander advanced. They moved like a hidden blade, silent and deadly in the dark. Behind them, storm clouds boiled above, masking their movement with thunder and rain. Back at the main camp, Treacherous kept up the illusion. Fires blazed, orders barked, and a decoy. Porus watched the restless camp, still believing the storm had slowed his enemy. But then came the whispers, rumors of a crossing upstream. Impossible, he thought. Alexander had been seen in camp just hours ago, but doubt is a curse no ruler can ignore. He dispatched 2,000 cavalry and 120 chariots, led by his own son, to investigate. They found the truth too late. The Macedonians had already crossed, hidden and ready. From the forest, the Macedonian horse archers struck, swift, savage. The Indian prince fought with fierce bravery, but fell in the chaos. His force shattered. The survivors fled. The Hydaspes had betrayed its secret. When Porus heard the news, it was not a report, it was a reckoning. His son was dead, Alexander was on his side of the river, and the real storm was marching for him. Now, the dance of war began. Porus deployed his forces with strategic precision. At the very front, over 100 war elephants stood shoulder to shoulder, an armored wall of flesh and steel. Behind them, infantry stretched wide, forming a human shield. At the flanks, chariots and swift cavalry. It was a formation built not just for defense, but for dominance. Alexander's eyes scanned the field, reading it like a general, but also like a predator. The center was a trap for any reckless advance. A direct charge would lead to suicide, but strength at the center meant weakness at the edges. So he struck where the joints bent. He unleashed his companion cavalry upon the Indian left, not to destroy, but to destabilize. Chaos bloomed, just as planned. Porus reacted. He ordered cavalry and chariots from his right flank to support the left, leaving that side exposed. The moment Coenus had been waiting for. Like a thunderclap, Coenus and his cavalry charged through the weakened right side, turned quickly, and attacked the back of the left, now trapped and falling apart. War elephants surged forward in desperation, breaking the Macedonian phalanx, but many Mahouts were struck down by sarissas aiming for eyes. Javelins flew, axes chopped at trunks and legs. In the chaos and without command, the beasts panicked, crushing their own men under iron feet. In this confusion, Alexander released his pejatyroi. Sarissas aimed forward like deadly spears. They marched into the broken center. Meanwhile, across the river, Treacherous made his move. His forces crossed swiftly, ambushing the retreating Indian units. They struck like hammer into chaos, shattering what was left. The trap was shut. The Indian formation collapsed. And yet, amidst the storm, Porus stood tall, high on his elephant, armor soaked, face bloodied, still fighting. King still unbroken, though the world around him had crumbled, captured, bloodied, but unbowed. Porus stood tall before the conqueror. "How shall I treat you?" asked Alexander. "Like a king," came the answer, and so he was. Alexander was struck by Porus's courage, how he stood tall, even in defeat. He spared the land, honored the king, and made him his ally. Together, they looked east, towards the Ganges. After 10 years of war, at the edge of the known world, they stopped. Not out of fear, not because they were beaten, but because they were human. At the banks of the Hydaspes River, the greatest army on earth fell silent. No chants, no revolt, just silence, heavier than steel. They had crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers. They had crushed Persia, stormed cities, shattered empires. But here, soaked in monsoon rain, surrounded by jungle, and whispers of the Nanda Empire rising to the east, the fire flickered out. The fate of Clitus and Callisthenes lingered in every man's memory. No one spoke, until one did. Coenus, the loyal general, stepped forward, not to rebel, but to reason. For the first time, Alexander didn't answer. He turned away and vanished into his tent. Days passed. On the third morning, Alexander emerged. He told everyone to return. The march was over. Here, at the Hydaspes, the conqueror of nations was not defeated by any sword or empire, but by the weight of time and the silence of tired men. 2 cities were founded to mark the victory. Nicaea, the city of victory, and Bucephala, named after Bucephalus, named not for the king, but for his companion since youth, who fell after battle. A piece of Alexander's heart was buried with him. Some say he fell in battle, others that he died of wounds days later. But the truth didn't matter to Alexander. The moment he fell the world changed. Satraps were appointed. The empire would be governed. But the campaign was over, and the legend had changed. The terrain had challenged him. The rivers had defied him. The people had resisted him. And yet, Alexander prevailed until his own army halted the wind. The Battle of the Hydaspes was his last great triumph. After that, the East would be left untouched, but its stories would be remembered. What do you think changed Alexander more? The war or the loss? Drop your take in the comments, and don't forget to like and share for more untold history.